My ex slept with my stepbrother before our wedding. 6 years later, she reached out, so I gave her a revenge that shocked her to the core. I'm Logan, 30 male, from Houston, Texas. I've got a story I've been sitting on for years, but with everything that's been happening recently, I figured it's time to let it out. 6 years ago, my life blew up in the worst way possible, and looking back now, there were so many signs I ignored. I'll start at the beginning. I was engaged to Amy. We'd been together for 7 years, and I genuinely thought she was my forever. We met when we were 17. She was the kind of person everyone liked, smart, sweet, and always smiling. I started working in construction. By the time I was only 23, I had my own contracting business, and Amy and I moved in together while she started her nursing school. She'd been delaying her studies and working different jobs until she figured out what she wanted. It felt like we were building this beautiful, stable life. My family adored Amy. My stepmom treated her like the daughter she never had. My dad would constantly make jokes about how lucky I was to have her. She fit into my life seamlessly, and I loved that we had our routines, our little traditions. And even though we weren't rich, we were happy. Or at least I thought we were. Now let me tell you about Kevin, my stepbrother. Kevin's 2 years younger than me, and we've never really gotten along. My dad married Kevin's mom when I was 12, and from day one, Kevin made it clear he wasn't thrilled about the whole blended family thing. He was the classic troublemaker, always pushing boundaries, getting into fights at school, and generally making everyone's life difficult. I've always been more of the play it safe type. I worked hard, kept my head down, and didn't get into drama. Kevin, on the other hand, thrived on it. He was the kind of guy who'd pick a fight just to prove he could win, and if he couldn't win, he'd find a way to make everyone miserable. Anyway, as we got older, I just stopped paying attention to Kevin's antics. I figured he'd grow out of it, but he didn't. He kept getting into trouble, DUIs, job hopping, random fights with family members. It was exhausting. Still, I never thought he'd interfere in my life in any meaningful way. I mean, he was Kevin. He wasn't serious about anything. But when I got serious with Amy, things started to change. Kevin, who had barely acknowledged her existence before, suddenly became very interested in her. At first, it seemed harmless. He'd crack jokes, compliment her cooking when we had family dinners, and make over-the-top comments like, "Man, Logan, you hit the jackpot." I figured he was just trying to be nice for once. Looking back now, I realize it wasn't just casual friendliness. It was something else entirely. Over time, Kevin started hanging around more. He'd stop by our place unannounced, claiming he was in the neighborhood or just bored. He'd stay for hours, making himself at home on our couch while Amy and I cooked dinner or watched a movie. I didn't think much of it at the time because I trusted Amy completely. I mean, we'd been together for almost a decade, and I never had any reason to doubt her. But there were little things, subtle stuff I didn't pick up on until later. Like how Kevin would always find a way to steer conversations back to himself whenever Amy was around, or how he'd try to impress her with stories about the crazy things he'd done. He'd act like this big-shot rebel, even though his life was pretty much a mess. Amy would laugh at his stories, and honestly, I didn't mind at first. She was just being polite, right? But Kevin started crossing lines. He'd make inappropriate jokes about how, if Logan ever screws up, I'm next in line. I'd laugh it off, but deep down, it bugged me. There was one night that stands out. Amy and I were hosting a small dinner for my parents, and Kevin showed up uninvited. He spent the whole evening monopolizing Amy's attention, talking about some wild trip he'd taken to Vegas. I remember feeling annoyed, but I brushed it off. Amy and I joked about it later, with her saying, "Your brother's a lot." It wasn't just his behavior around Amy, though. Kevin seemed to resent me in a way that became more obvious as time went on. He'd make snide comments about my business, saying things like, "Must be nice to sit in an office while other people do the real work," or he'd poke fun at my relationship, asking, "How does a guy like you keep a girl like her interested?" I always shrugged it off because I didn't want to give Kevin the satisfaction of knowing he got under my skin. But in hindsight, it was clear he envied me, my business, my relationship, the way our family respected me. It all seemed to eat at him. Even my parents noticed it. My stepmom once pulled me aside after a family gathering and said, "Kevin's acting strange. You should keep an eye on him." I thought she was overreacting. I mean, Kevin was just being Kevin, right? I didn't realize how deep his resentment ran. The months leading up to my engagement were a whirlwind. Amy and I had talked about marriage for years, and when I finally proposed, she was over the moon. We started planning right away, venues, guest lists, everything. My parents were thrilled, and even Kevin seemed to be supportive. He congratulated me with a handshake and a weird smile that I now recognize as completely fake. Looking back, I think Kevin hated that moment more than anything else. He wasn't the kind of person who could be happy for someone else. For me, though, it was the happiest I'd ever been. I felt like my life was finally coming together. I was ready to marry the woman I loved, build a family, and keep growing my business. I thought I'd worked hard and earned every bit of it. But Kevin wasn't done yet. I ignored all the red flags, thinking my relationship with Amy was bulletproof. I figured Kevin's attitude was just his usual jealousy, nothing more. I didn't realize he was quietly tearing down everything I'd built. If I could go back, I'd pay more attention to the little things, the way Kevin's eyes lingered on Amy, the way he'd always show up when I wasn't home, the way Amy seemed a little too quick to defend him whenever I called out his behavior. But hindsight is 20/20, right? At the time, I couldn't see the cracks forming. I thought Amy and I were unbreakable. I thought Kevin was just being his annoying, petty self. I thought everything was fine. I was wrong. It wasn't fine, and it was only a matter of time before everything fell apart. Our wedding was less than 24 hours away. Everything was planned down to the last detail. Floral arrangements, seating charts, even the damn appetizers. We'd been working on this for months. It wasn't just a wedding, it was the culmination of almost a decade together. Amy had suggested we stay in separate hotels the night before the wedding. She said it was tradition, something about avoiding bad luck. I wasn't really into the whole superstition thing, but she was adamant about it. She made it seem romantic, like the anticipation of seeing each other at the altar would be worth it. So I booked a suite at a hotel nearby and planned to spend the evening hanging out with my groomsmen. The night started out fine. We grabbed some dinner, cracked jokes, and talked about how tomorrow would be the big day. I was nervous, sure, but in a good way, you know, that kind of nervous where you're excited about what's coming next. At one point, my buddy Trevor made some cheesy toast about how lucky I was to have found the one, and I just laughed, thinking about how right he was. Amy was my person. Or so I thought. Around 10 p.m., I realized I'd forgotten something important, my wedding vows. I'd written them on this nice stationery Amy had picked out, and I'd left them in her bag earlier that day. My plan was to transfer them to the fancy little booklet she'd gotten for the ceremony, but of course, I forgot. I texted her, but she didn't reply. No big deal, I thought. She'd probably fallen asleep early, knowing how much tomorrow meant to her. Amy was always the planner, the one who made sure everything was perfect. I figured I'd swing by her hotel, grab the vows, and be back in no time. When I got to her hotel, the front desk clerk seemed a little hesitant to give me her room number. I explained that I was her fiancé and just needed to grab something from her room. Eventually, the guy handed me the key to room 308, and I headed up, thinking about how funny it would be to tell Amy about my little late-night mission. But when I opened the door, everything stopped. I can't really explain what it felt like in that moment. It was like my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. There they were, Amy and Kevin, wrapped up in each other on the bed. The room was dimly lit, but I didn't need bright lights to see what was happening. They weren't just sitting there awkwardly, caught in a weird situation. They were laughing, full-on laughing, like it was some kind of joke. For a second, I thought maybe I was in the wrong room. Maybe the clerk had messed up. But no, there was Amy, the woman I was supposed to marry in less than 24 hours, tangled up with my stepbrother. Amy's face went pale as soon as she saw me. She froze like a deer in headlights, her mouth opening and closing as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Kevin didn't look the least bit sorry. In fact, he smirked. He had this smug, one look on his face, like he was proud of what he'd done. I don't think I've ever hated anyone more in my life than I hated him in that moment. Amy finally managed to say something. "It's not what it looks like," she stammered, finding to cover herself with a blanket. "Not what it looks like? Are you kidding me?" I didn't respond. I couldn't. My mind was racing, my chest felt like it was about to explode, and I knew if I stayed in that room any longer, I'd lose it. So I turned around, slammed the door behind me, and walked away. I don't even remember how I got back to my hotel. I must have driven, but it's all a blur. By the time I got to my room, I was shaking, my hands, my legs, even my jaw. It was like my whole body was rejecting what I'd just seen. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, trying to make sense of it. This was Amy, the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with, and Kevin, my stepbrother. Of all the people in the world, why him? I don't know how long I sat there before I finally looked at my phone. There were already a few missed calls from Amy and a string of texts. I couldn't even bring myself to read them all. As for Kevin, I didn't hear from him at all. Not that I expected to. He'd gotten what he wanted, or at least what he thought he wanted. That night, I barely slept. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene in my head over and over again. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them laughing. That was the part that stuck with me the most. They weren't just caught in a bad moment. They were enjoying it. The next few days were a complete blur. I don't think I really processed what happened right away. It was like my brain decided to put me on autopilot just so I could get through the motions. First thing I had to do was cancel the wedding. If you've ever planned a wedding, you know how much work goes into it. Months of booking vendors, organizing seating charts, confirming with guests, gone in a single night. I made a list of all the vendors we'd hired and started calling them one by one. Most of them were understanding, though I could tell some were annoyed. The venue staff said something like, "Well, you're not getting your deposit back," as if that was the biggest loss I was dealing with. I didn't even argue. I just told them to cancel everything. At that point, I would have burned money if it meant I didn't have to think about the wedding anymore. Next, I had to let the guests know. My stepmom offered to handle it, which was a huge relief. She called all the family members while my dad handled a few of the out-of-town friends who'd already arrived. Everyone wanted to know why. I told my parents to just say it was called off because of personal reasons. But you know how families are, nothing stays quiet for long. By the end of the week, pretty much everyone knew the story. I'm sure the details got exaggerated along the way. Small town gossip tends to do that. But I honestly didn't care. Let people talk. Kevin and Amy deserved whatever judgment came their way. Speaking of Kevin, my stepmom didn't hold back. She was livid when I told her what happened. She was so angry she hung up on me, not because of anything I did, but because she couldn't process that her own son could do something so disgusting. She was so afraid that this would affect her relationship with Dad. My stepmom's one of those people who tries to see the good in everyone, but even she couldn't excuse this. A day or two after the wedding was supposed to happen, she called Kevin and told him not to bother showing his face around anymore. My dad didn't even speak to him. He just told my stepmom, "I have nothing to say to him," and that was that. Kevin ended up leaving for Miami a couple of weeks later. I guess he figured it'd be easier to start fresh somewhere else than to deal with the fallout at home. Good riddance. Then there was Amy. God, where do I even start with her? At first, she kept sending me texts begging me to talk to her. "It was a mistake, Logan," one of them said. "I don't know what came over me," another one read. "I love you. Please let me explain." Explain what? That you decided to hook up with my stepbrother the night before our wedding? There was nothing she could say that would make it okay. I didn't even open most of her messages. I just blocked her number, but blocking her didn't stop her. Amy started emailing me instead. Then she tried calling from unknown numbers. Every time I blocked one, she'd find another way to get through. It got to the point where I was dreading every notification on my phone, wondering if it was her again. One voicemail she left still sticks with me. She was crying, saying how much she regretted what happened and how she still wanted to marry me. She kept saying, "I made a mistake, Logan. I was scared and I messed up. Please don't throw away everything we've built." Hearing her cry should have made me feel something, right? Anger, sadness, maybe even pity. But I felt nothing. It was like she was a stranger to me now. I'd spent 7 years with her, thinking she was the person I'd grow old with, and in a single night, she destroyed all of that. So it's been 6 years since the mess with Amy and Kevin. Looking back now, I can confidently say I'm in a completely different place, mentally, emotionally, and professionally. Honestly, moving on wasn't about finding myself or some pity-driven reinvention. I didn't pack up my life because I was running away. I left Houston because I had bigger plans for myself. For a while, I didn't tell anyone where I moved. I didn't want to risk Amy showing up at my door, begging for another chance. I knew she'd try. After everything fell apart, I realized I'd been too comfortable. My contracting business was doing fine, but I wasn't pushing myself. I decided to expand, and Dallas seemed like the perfect place to make that happen. Bigger market, more opportunities, and frankly, no lingering reminders of my old life. Starting over in Dallas wasn't easy. I didn't know anyone there, and getting my foot in the door took hustle. But I've always been good at that, finding opportunities where others don't. Within a year, I'd gone from small remodeling jobs to full-on new builds. I hired a team, got my name out there, and by year 2, I was taking on projects that younger me wouldn't have dreamed of. And then there's Vanessa. I met her 3 years ago through a client. She's a lawyer, smart, ambitious, and doesn't take crap from anyone. The first time we met, she was tearing into a guy who was trying to wiggle out of paying for work he'd contracted. I watched her completely dismantle this dude's argument without breaking a sweat, and I couldn't stop grinning. I asked her out that same week. Vanessa doesn't play games, and she's not afraid to call me out when I need it. She pushes me to be better, and for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm with someone who's genuinely on my level. With Amy, I was always bending over backward trying to keep her happy. With Vanessa, it's different. We're partners, Fast forward to now, and we were planning our wedding. It was happening in 2 weeks, and I couldn't be more excited. We were keeping it small, just close friends and family. Vanessa and I have handled every detail together, which has been a completely different experience from my first engagement. Back then, Amy made all the decisions, I just wrote the checks. This time, it feels like I actually have a say in what's happening, and it's refreshing. But just when I thought life couldn't be better, guess who decided to pop back up? Amy. Out of nowhere, she messaged me on Instagram. I didn't even realize she had an account. Her profile was filled with old photos of us, vacations, birthdays, random memories from when we were together. It was creepy, like she was trying to freeze time and pretend the last 6 years hadn't happened. Her message was simple, but it pissed me off immediately. Logan, I heard about your wedding. I need to talk to you. Please. I stared at the screen for a solid minute, trying to process the audacity. I mean, really? After everything she did, she thought she could just message me like we were old friends? Like we could sit down, chat, and laugh about how crazy life has been? I showed the message to Vanessa. She read it, looked up at me, and said, "You're not seriously considering responding, right?" I told her I hadn't decided yet. I messaged Amy back the next day. "What do you want?" Her response came almost immediately. "Logan, I need to talk to you in person. Please, just one conversation. It's important." So I messaged her back, agreeing to meet. She replied almost instantly, like she was just waiting by her phone. "Thank you, Logan. I promise you won't regret this," followed by a string of messages about how much she missed me and how she wanted to make things right. Make things right? She had 6 years to be loyal and couldn't manage it, but now, all of a sudden, she wanted to fix things? Yeah, no. I wasn't buying whatever she was selling. Vanessa and I came up with a plan. There was no way I was meeting Amy alone. Vanessa knew everything about my history with Amy, and she wasn't just supportive, she was actively excited about what we were about to pull off. That's one of the things I love about her, she doesn't sit on the sidelines. She's right there in the thick of it, making sure we handle business. I told Amy we'd meet at a local bar, not some fancy, intimate restaurant where she could act like this was a date, but a casual spot where I could control the setting. I reserved a private corner in the back, something VIP. I told the bartender what we were planning. He was more than happy to play along, probably because he thought it was hilarious. The next step was assembling the crew. My groomsmen, Trevor, Alex, and Marcus, were more than willing to help. They've known me forever and were just as pissed at Amy as I was. When I explained the plan, they jumped at the chance to be part of it. We got to work gathering the props. First, we ordered a fake wedding cake online and had "Congrats Kevin and Amy" written on it in bright red frosting. Then we printed out fake wedding invitations with their names on them. It sounds a lot, I know, but it was something messy and cheap. But the pièce de résistance. By the time everything was ready, I couldn't wait to see her reaction. The day of the meeting, I got to the bar about 20 minutes early with Vanessa and the guys. The bartender set everything up in the private corner, the cake, the fake invitations. We even had a speaker ready to play a recording of Kevin's laugh. It was all perfectly ridiculous and over the top, which felt fitting for the situation. Amy showed up right on time, dressed to the nines. She was wearing a dress I recognized from years ago, one she used to wear when she wanted to impress people. Her hair was done, her makeup was flawless, and she had this hopeful, almost smug look on her face, like she really thought this was going to work. She walked into the room and immediately started crying. "Logan," she said, her voice shaking, "I can't tell you how much it means to me that you agreed to meet." I nodded and gestured for her to sit down, keeping my face as neutral as possible. She launched into this whole spiel about how much she missed me, how she regretted everything, how she'd made a terrible mistake but had grown so much since then. She said she'd been scared of how much she loved me, which is why she acted out. Scared? She slept with my stepbrother the night before our wedding because she was scared? The mental gymnastics were most impressive. I kept a straight face, nodding along like I was really listening. I even leaned forward and rested my chin on my hand at one point, just to sell it. She kept going. "I know I hurt you, Logan, but we had something special. We were so good together. I know we can get back to that." At this point, I was fighting back laughter, not because anything she was saying was funny, but because the anticipation was killing me. I knew what was coming, and I couldn't wait to see her face. After about 20 minutes, in walked Vanessa and my groomsmen, carrying the cake and the fake invitations, wearing masks that had Kevin's face, something they got creative with and I didn't know about. Amy's face went pale. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice shaking. Trevor set the cake down on the table, and Marcus handed her one of the fake invitations. Vanessa just stood there with her arms crossed, a satisfied smirk on her face. What is this?" Amy stammered, looking around the room like she was trying to make sense of it. Then the recording of Kevin's laugh started playing. That's when it hit her. "You set me up," she screamed, her face turning bright red. "No," I said calmly, standing up and looking her in the eye. "I just wanted to give you the kind of send-off you deserve. You think you can show up 6 years later and pretend like nothing happened? You think you can waltz into my life and ruin everything I've built? Not a chance." Amy started crying, real tears this time, not the crocodile ones she'd walked in with. "Logan, please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean." "Save it," I said, cutting her off. "You've already done enough. Leave me and my fiancé alone. Don't contact me again." She tried to argue, but Vanessa stepped forward and said, "You heard him. It's time to go." The second Amy walked out, the whole room erupted in laughter. The bartender even poked his head in and gave us a thumbs up. After the stunt at the bar, I thought I'd finally seen the last of Amy. She stormed out humiliated, and I figured that would be enough for her to leave me alone. But what I didn't realize was how far gone she really was. Her Instagram message was just the tip of the iceberg. After the bar incident, Amy's attempts to contact me went from annoying to downright unsettling. It started with emails. She sent dozens, all begging me to meet her again. "Logan, I know I messed up. Please, I can explain everything. Just give me one more chance." She'd go on about how she was still in love with me, how she knew we were meant to be together. Some of the emails were so long I had to scroll multiple times to get to the end. I stopped reading them after the first couple, but they kept coming. When I didn't respond to her emails, she started leaving voicemails. She must have gotten a new number because I blocked all the ones she'd used before. She was sobbing so hard I could barely make out what she was saying, but the gist of it was that she couldn't live without me. "Logan, please, I know I messed up, but I can't do this without you. You're the only one who ever understood me. I need you. I know you're still in love with me. I could see it in your eyes." It made my stomach turn. This wasn't the Amy I knew. She'd always been manipulative, sure, but now she sounded desperate in a way that didn't feel right. Then she started showing up. The first time was at my office. She walked in like she owned the place, telling my receptionist she needed to see me immediately. When my receptionist told her I wasn't available, Amy refused to leave. She sat in the waiting area for over an hour, crying and muttering to herself about how she just needed to talk to me. Eventually, security had to escort her out. A few days later, she showed up at my apartment. She stood outside my door for what felt like forever, banging on it and yelling my name. Vanessa was the one who called the police that time. Amy left before they arrived, but not before leaving a note taped to the door. It was a long, rambling letter about how she couldn't let me go and how she'd wait as long as it takes for me to forgive her. It got worse from there. One night, I came home to find that she'd left a box on my doorstep. Inside was a bunch of random stuff from our old life together, photos, movie ticket stubs, even an old hoodie of mine that I hadn't seen in years. There was also a letter that said, "I kept all of this because I knew we'd find our way back to each other. Please don't throw it away." Vanessa was furious. She wanted to confront Amy, but I told her it wasn't worth it. Instead, I called Amy's parents. Her mom answered, and the second I said Amy's name, she let out this heavy sigh. "Logan, we're so sorry," she said. "She's not well. We've been trying to get her help, but she won't listen to us." That's when they told me about her addiction to lorazepam, a painkiller she'd been hooked on for years. I'd never heard of it before, but her mom explained how it started after an injury she got while working as a nurse. At first, she was just taking it for the pain, but it quickly spiraled out of control. Her addiction had cost her everything: her career, her friendships, her independence. And now it had driven her to latch on to me, convinced that getting back together would somehow fix her life. I felt bad for her. I really did. But sympathy only goes so far. At the end of the day, I had to protect myself and Vanessa. A week later, Amy crossed the line for the last time. She showed up at my parents' house. They hadn't seen her in years, and she just appeared on their doorstep out of nowhere, crying and begging for them to talk to me on her behalf. My mom called me, furious. "Logan, you need to handle this. She's not well, and she's dragging us into it now." That's when I knew I couldn't just ignore her anymore. The next day, Vanessa and I went to the courthouse and filed for a restraining order. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the only option left. Even after the restraining order, Amy kept trying to reach out. She created fake social media accounts and sent emails from random addresses. Each time, I blocked her and reported it. Finally, her parents stepped in. They checked her into an inpatient rehab facility, and I haven't heard from her since. Her dad called me once to apologize for everything and to let me know she was getting the help she needed. "Logan, we're doing everything we can, but it's going to be a long road," he said. "Look, I know some of you might criticize what I did at the bar, but you have to understand, It was nothing compared to the harm she caused years ago. She betrayed me in the worst possible way and left me to pick up the pieces of a life I thought was unshakable. And honestly, I didn't know she was struggling with something serious back then. If I had, maybe I would have handled things differently. But at the time, I was just a guy trying to stand up for himself after being walked all over. At the end of the day, I'm grateful for where I am now. Vanessa and I are happily married, and we're building a life together that's built on trust and respect, things I never had with Amy.